Assalamu alaikum, folks. I'm Moise. I'm the core Flutter lead at DSCSuperior University. And this is our session for Flutter for Beginners, where we will teach the beginners how to get started with the Flutter technology. So the Flutter technology is a cross-platform technology to target both iOS and Android. And it has some scope in the web as well. So today we have our honorable guest, Ms. Sakina, with us. She will coach us throughout this session and teach us how to get started with the Flutter. So now let's invite honorable guest, Ms. Sakina Abbas.
Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you're all having a good day. So today's session, it's all about Flutter for beginners. We'll be talking about, if you're just getting started with Flutter, if you're new to Flutter, if you're just curious about Flutter because you've been hearing about it a lot recently with the swag events and the giveaway events happening recently by our Pakistan chapters of Flutter. Or if you're just at a crossroads and you're considering starting to learn Flutter but haven't really made up your mind yet, then this session is for you. So for those of you who don't know me, hello, my name is Sakina Abbas. I am a co-founder and CEO of Reactor Private Limited. We specialize in the development of web and mobile applications. I started off as a native Android developer and then eventually transitioned to Flutter development when it started gaining momentum. So currently I'm leading DevOps and Flutter development at my company Reactor. Other than that, I am an active member of two communities. The first is Flutter Karachi, Pakistan. So I'm pretty sure you might have seen me in other events hosted by this community. And the second that I recently joined is the Google Developer Space Singapore. I joined them as a women in tech speaker. So that's really awesome. We're constantly engaging in organizing different tech events so as to contribute to the community and just dissipate all the knowledge that we've learned so far. So in today's session, what will we be learning? We'll be looking at what Flutter really is. We'll look at how Flutter makes the application development process easy and fast. I'll be answering the most famous and the most frequently asked question, what is the future of Flutter in Pakistan? And why should one learn Flutter at all? Then I'll be giving you some tips and techniques and some roadmap that you guys can follow in order to get started with Flutter. We'll be doing a live coding and demo just so you guys can get a preview of what Flutter is really like, what's happening behind the scenes, everything. And finally, we'll be having a Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll be answering them at the end of the session. So let's get started. Now, what Flutter is, what is it really? In the simplest of terms, Flutter is a framework to develop cross-platform applications. What does that mean? It means that you write a single code base in Dart, the programming language is Dart. You write a single code base, and from that single code base, you get applications for multiple platforms, ranging from Android, iOS, web, Linux, Mac, Windows, Fuchsia, which is a new and coming OS announced by Google. So you have this wide array of operating systems and platforms that Flutter supports. Originally, I think it started with Android and iOS, but lately it has been working a lot in the domains of web, Windows, and Linux particularly. Okay. So the programming language, as I told you, we use Dart. And the good thing about Flutter is that it's open source. So you can actually find the repository of Flutter, the official repository of Flutter on GitHub. And you can contribute to it by making pull requests, okay, maybe enhancing some feature or another, and people's pull requests actually get merged, right? So even though it's developed and owned by Google, since it's open source, it's being maintained by the community per se. And the important thing to notice is that it's around 3.5 years old now. It was launched in May 2017. So it's kind of important to know when it came out and why it's important to know that. You'll get to know in just a couple of slides. So in essence, Flutter is literally one framework to rule them all. Now, you may ask, what kind of applications can you build with Flutter? And I would say that the sky's the limit. Literally, from building e-commerce applications to music players to chatting apps, chatbots, and people actually build huge, like well-functioning clones of Slack. Okay, then you can even build games, right? I've built a game in Flutter, and the experience was awesome. You can even build IoT applications and everything so that your application can interact with physical and electronic devices around you. Okay, a good example of that is that Philips, I believe, it created an application so the customers of Philips products, they can interact with their devices through this application. Okay, so quite literally, from building the very smallest of applications to building huge and intricately complex applications, you can literally build anything with Flutter. Okay, so that's awesome. And these are some of the top applications that were built with Flutter. As you can see, Grab is a very famous food delivery service in the Middle Eastern region, if I'm not wrong. Then we have an application by Alibaba. Then we have an application for Hamilton, which is, I think, Hamilton Hotels. I don't exactly remember. But like, as you can see, these are just 8 of the very top applications that were built with Flutter. And the good news is that recently, like just about a few weeks ago, Google revamped its ads app, Google Ads app. They completely revamped it and migrated the entire source code to Flutter. Okay, so if you check out the latest Google Ads application, it's made entirely with Flutter. You can check out the rest of the applications on this URL that I've provided down here below, which is flutter.dev/showcase. So now, naturally, when I wanted to learn about Flutter, when I typed Flutter in Google, I got these 2 search results at the very top. Now you can see that I've highlighted 2 portions very significantly. First is build native interfaces in minutes, and the second is beautiful native apps in record time. Okay, so Flutter enables that. Now, funny story, when I hadn't really started off with it, with Flutter at the time, and I just read these 2 things, I was really suspicious. I was like, is this another clickbait? But being the curious cat that I am, I still decided to, explore it because it was really gaining momentum. So I did decide to explore it, and it turns out that they weren't lying. This is not clickbait at all. It actually allows developers to build native interfaces in minutes. And a lot of my talks, a lot of my online talks in the recent past, they have been focused around building X in record time or building Y in record time. So they're not lying at all, okay? Now, it's established that Flutter really enhances the developer experience by making the speed of the development really fast, really quick. And also, it's easy development. It's not as difficult comparison to other platforms or other SDKs. Now, how is that? First of all, Flutter comes with a lot of pre-built widgets, okay? It uses two guidelines, two design guidelines primarily. The first is the material design guidelines, which is Google's official guidelines for designing UI. And the other is Cupertino, which is Apple's or iOS design guidelines. Okay, so the widgets that are pre-built in Flutter, they are following all those design guidelines, right? So from the very basic of widgets like button or text or let's say text editing controller, where the user enters something and basically it's the part of the form that takes users input. From these very basic widgets to very complex widgets and very useful widgets. So for instance, we have the navigation drawer, the navigation tab, bottom sheet, and etc. etc. It it comes pre-built with everything, okay? And the best part about it is that for each widget, you can customize it as per your liking. So even though Flutter provides very basic buttons, okay, it provides a floating action button separately, a flat button separately, an icon button separately, an icon text button separately, it provides different variants of each widget, and you can even customize all of those widgets as per your liking. So that's really awesome. Flutter is highly customizable. And then for those widgets that are not present in Flutter itself, you can find them on pub.dev, where third-party contributors, they've built their own widgets for their own use cases, and they've published it on this pub.dev for others to use. Okay, so it's just a single line of code for importing it, and then just a very small code snippets for basically using them, right? So a lot of widgets, pre-packed and highly customizable. Even this gradient button that you see over here, you can easily add a gradient to anything, whether it's your button, whether it's your container, picture, anything at all. You can just do that with 1 or 2 lines of code. So suffice it to say, all of the widgets that you see over here, this circular avatar, this container that's a little translucent, this background image that has a little bit of opacity, then these row of kind of slightly rounded, cornered containers, then these beautiful tag items, this navigation drawer, all of it you can easily build with Flutter. So you basically put together a lot of widgets to create a very aesthetic UI as per your liking. And it's pretty fast and easy because you don't have to worry about what's happening behind the scenes. It's very easy reuse of code. Then the next thing that Flutter supports, or rather offers, is hot reload and hot restart. What hot reload is that, so you made some changes to your code, okay, and you press hot reload or you press Control S on Android Studio. What would happen is that it would preserve the state of the application, okay, and it would reflect those UI changes right there and then. As you can see in this GIF, this person has first pressed this plus button, so the count has been 6. Then previously this color was indigo. He changed that to orange and he pressed hot reload, and it was instantly reflected over there without changing the state of the application, without restarting the application from the scratch. It's like you basically make UI changes and then instantly see them being reflected on your application. Hot restart is that it basically quickly restarts your application, so it refreshes your application state. If you were on screen B, then you would be back to screen A, and but all of the UI changes and all of the library configurations that you've integrated, all of that will be reflected on your app this time. So hot reload is basically for messing around with the UI, checking if I do this, what would happen? If I do that, what would happen? And hot restart is mostly for when you import assets. And if you want all of those changes to be incorporated into your app, that's what hot restart is for, because it refreshes your application state, all right? Flutter also offers comparatively shorter build times, and I'm speaking this from experience. I've done application development in native Android, and the build times were horrible. Even with iOS, the build times are pretty horrible because of CocoaBots and everything. With Flutter, it significantly reduces the build times, and with hot reload and hot restart, you don't have to wait 5 to 10 minutes for the application to refresh just to see small changes, right? So it really comes in handy in the development process. Now, finally, in fact, not finally, there are many other things, but these were just on the top of my list. Flutter also offers you Flutter Inspector. What that is used for is when you've written a very wordy or very verbose code, and you want to fix something in a particular widget, then you can use Flutter Inspector to do that. You literally enable it. I'll be showing you how when we're looking at the live demo. You literally enable it, and on your application, you just press or you just select any single widget that you want to fix, and it will redirect you to the specific code where you've utilized this and all the relating components to it. So you don't have to spend minutes or hours just scavenging through the code, just looking for where is this thing located. It's very quick and easy. Then also a very famous question that people ask is that, okay, so Flutter provides cross-platform application development support. What if there is something that Flutter doesn't have support for, right? So platform channels come in over there. What platform channels do is that you establish a platform channel in your Flutter code. What this does is that it invokes the native code of Android or iOS. So that, I mean, obviously Android and iOS, they have native support for everything, for each of their own platforms, right? And Flutter being the cross-platform application development SDK, it doesn't have support for everything, at least not yet, right? So obviously you have to take care of some things very natively. So what you can do here is that you don't really have to learn Android from scratch, or you don't have to learn iOS from scratch for just the functionalities that are not officially supported in Flutter. You can write just small chunks of code for that in native Android using Java or Kotlin, or in a native iOS using Swift or whatever. And then you invoke those smaller chunks of code from Flutter using platform channels. Okay, so this fulfills the problem of lacking support for certain things in Flutter. And then we have ID shortcuts. You can use VS Code for Flutter. You can use Android Studio for Flutter. It's all up to you. Coming from the native Android development background, I prefer Android Studio because I'm more familiar with that. So both IDs basically offer shortcuts that really fasten your development. So for instance, if your widget tree is something, okay, and you feel like you need to inject another widget, another UI element into your tree, or maybe you want to wrap your entire tree inside another element, maybe you want to take out a specific UI element, aka widget, and you want to refactor it. There are shortcuts for doing all of that. So you don't have to write manual code for each and everything. It's just a 1 or 2 click process, and the ID will do it for you. And you just have to, it'll basically create everything for you, and you just have to fill in the blanks. So that's really awesome. Now, the very, and I would say the most awaited question that you guys have been willing to hear the answer for. What is the future of Flutter in Pakistan? Getting a lot of these questions lately, so decide to answer it. Okay, so the first question is, what is the need of Flutter developers in the market? And I would say that the need is rapidly increasing. And the reason for this is that, let me demonstrate it to you with an example. So consider 2 companies, Company A and Company B. They both hire 2 developers each. Company A hires, the 2 developers that Company A hires, they're both Flutter developers, and the developers that Company B hires, one is the Android developer and one is the iOS developer. Now, the Company B, they're building one application. Okay, sorry, they're focused on one project. And for one project, they need both the applications, Android and iOS. So one recruit, he'll be working on the Android part, and another recruit, he'll be working on the iOS part for the same project, okay? Company A, on the other hand, since they're both Flutter engineers, they would be working either on the same code base. So that means they'll be working on just one project, okay, which will produce Android and iOS apps both. But because they'll be working together, they will either be able to complete the project in significantly less time, half of what Company B is going to achieve, or if they're not working together on the same project, let's say the other Flutter developer is working on the other project. So it's like they hit two birds with one stone. That's company A, and company B, they're literally allocating all of their resources to basically each platform, which is not efficient, right? So basically, the gist of this is that with Flutter, since there's cross-platform application development, there is very efficient use of resources. And being the CEO, being an entrepreneur myself, I know how this works. And that's why people and organizations are really preferring Flutter development in their companies. The second question is that what is the average salary of Flutter developer? It was estimated and reported, actually not estimated, it was reported. I don't exactly remember the exact source. I'll probably add it in the comments later. That it was reported in March 2020 that in Pakistan, the average yearly salary for a Flutter developer was about 9,000 US dollars, which comes down to around 122,000 Pakistan rupees monthly. But that's like the kind of like a benchmark, right? The average one. If we look more deeply into the industry, if basically Flutter developers are earning from at least 40,000 per month to as high as 120, 150, depending on their skill level and depending on their experience. Which leads us to the third question: do companies want to hire someone with a lot of experience? A lot of people have been asking me that. Companies, they look for Flutter developers with 2 years of experience and so and so. So I would say that yes and no. It depends on the company itself. Some companies, they're specifically looking for very highly experienced Flutter developers. Others, they're okay with just with little experience. But I would say that experience, don't focus on experience, focus on your skill set. Focus on how much you know of Flutter. Focus on your project's portfolio of Flutter. Okay, if you have a very rich and a very strong portfolio of your projects, of your past projects, then it automatically increases your chances of getting hired as a Flutter developer. Okay, so focus on that instead of being let down by experience, right? And then lastly, what about freelancing in Flutter? Very, very lucrative. It's a money-making industry, I would say, because in freelancing, you get paid per project basis. So the bigger the project, the better you earn. And then secondly, since when you're freelancing, most of your clients are foreigners. So obviously, there's the currency gap in everything, the currency conversion and everything. So definitely I have seen a lot of people freelancing in Flutter, and they have been hiring pretty good amounts. And you should definitely research that yourself and see for yourself what rate they're offering. Okay, so even if you've learned Flutter and you're having difficulty finding a job, you should definitely start with freelancing. It will build your project portfolio, and it'll also give you experience. This is a hiring post that I actually saw on LinkedIn. I have obviously hidden the details for their own privacy reasons. There was this person from this company that specifically asked for Flutter developers with 3 to 4 years of experience. Now, if you remember, I told you guys that Flutter is roughly 3.5 years old. It was launched in May 2017. So even if we're looking at people with 3 years of experience, that will probably be the creators of Flutter itself, or the very early adopters of Flutter who are probably, I don't know, like who tech critics, or whose job is to basically experience with the latest tech, and then just give their honest feedback or whatever. So don't be overwhelmed by posts like these, okay? Usually people ask for 1 to 2 years of experience, but there are actually companies that are looking at fresh experience as well. You just need to have a strong skill set and a strong portfolio. Now, why should we learn Flutter? I have already demonstrated to you that the demand is very rapidly growing. It's very easy and quick to learn. It's very easy and quick to adopt. It's very easy and simple and quick to develop applications, multiple applications from a single code base. You literally have to write one single code base in Dart. That's it. And if you want to create the applications for the other platforms from that single code base. You just have to make a little bit of changes, which are configuration changes. Like, so for instance, the name of the application, the icons of the application, and just these little changes. Or if you're using third-party dependencies from pub.dev, then some dependencies require you to do some custom setting. So for instance, there's this, for instance, the notifications dependency, Firebase FCM, Firebase Cloud Messaging dependency from pub.dev. It requires you to do some tweaks and changes for the configurations. So for instance, adding the key in the iOS project or adding the key in the Android project, these are the smallest bit of changes that you need to do in order to get these things started and injected, right? So you don't exactly have to write the entire code, just small tweaks here and there for when you're publishing the application per se. And then obviously I've also demonstrated to you that Flutter is a hot market. It's a lucrative market. You just have to learn it very well, and you just need to know where you can apply it, all right? But other than that, people still ask, okay, fine, you've said all that, but why Flutter? Why? I mean, there are other frameworks, other older frameworks like React Native, Xamarin, Ionic, PhoneGap, all these older frameworks, these are also for cross-platform application development. Yes, and the most debate arises on Flutter versus React Native because React Native is just as popular. So my reason for choosing Flutter over React Native is that Flutter uses native components. So all of the widgets that we were talking about, they're not some out-of-the-world technology or just something outside the scope of native development, okay? If you look behind the scenes, the native components are such that they're following the guidelines that are actually followed in native Android or native iOS. Secondly, when you write your Flutter code and when you're building your application, all that Flutter code is actually compiled into the native code itself. So all the code is basically translated into the native language, okay? So the performance of Flutter applications is really, really good. In React Native, React Native is mostly suited for people who are already familiar with web technologies because it uses because it uses JavaScript in order to bridge the communication between the application and the native components. So it results in a relatively poor performance. Secondly, the documentation of Flutter is so detailed, it is so easy that anybody with any amount of experience can understand it. Okay, the documentation, everything is well documented. There are frequent videos on the smallest bit of things, and it's just very supportive for the developers when they're trying to adopt this technology. React Native, the documentation is a little bit difficult. Okay, it might delve into things just right away. It would get to things. It's a little confusing for beginners at least. So there's this difference in the documentation. Okay, for Flutter, their official documentation is very strong. Because Flutter is open source, and if you are facing any errors or bugs that you can't find the answer to elsewhere on Stack Overflow or whatever, then people actually open issues on GitHub. Okay. And when a lot of people vote on that issue, then the Flutter team, it prioritizes that issue and attempts to solving it. So we have very supportive and receptive developer communities in Flutter. They are very receptive to feedback. And in Flutter, you will see, like, we have a lot of sessions, a lot of events, a lot of conferences happening for Flutter every now and then. So even someone who's not that up to date with Flutter, they can still get a hang of just one event and just figure out what's happening lately, right? Other than that, shameless self-promotion here, Flutter Karachi, Pakistan and Flutter Islamabad are two Flutter chapters of Pakistan. And Flutter Karachi has a Slack group. It has a Slack channel. So we have a lot of mentors over here. And if anybody has any questions, they can drop in over there, and any one of us will help them out over there. So Flutter communities are very active, very receptive to you guys and your problems. And React Native also, while it also has its own communities, it's not as active as Flutter. I mean, I haven't even seen Android communities as active as Flutter's. So yeah, there's that. Now, how to get started with Flutter? So basically, first of all, you obviously need to install Flutter on your system. You type Flutter, the first link that opens, click on that. You click on Get Started or Install, and this will open. These are the operating systems that you can choose from. If you're a Windows user, you click on Windows and so and so. And then it'll open an entire guidelines page, which is entailing step-by-step installation. And I think it even shows that you might run into this error. If you run into this error, this is what you need to be doing, and so and so. So it offers you installation. It guides you through the installation process of Flutter itself, and also an IDE. Like, I think it has documentation for Android Studio. But regardless, you don't really have to install Android Studio because it's a heavy IDE. You could start with VS Code. It's entirely up to you. All right, the next thing is that if you want a quicker alternative to test out Flutter just to see what the playing field looks like, these are three of the resources that you could leverage. The first is Dartpad. Dartpad is primarily for teaching you programming in Dart, but it also supports Flutter programming. So you can test out Flutter and it will print out the result like as it would look in an actual application on the side. And the other is CodePen, it's very famous, and the screenshot that I've also attached is from CodePen. You write Flutter code on the left, and you have this screen on the right. So all of that UI stuff is replicated over here. And actually, I don't remember his name, this very famous Flutter developer, he made an entire clone of Slack using CodePen. Okay, so CodePen is really handy when you don't want to delve into Android Studio or VS Code or whatever. The other is flutlab.io. I think it enables you to play with widgets and experiment with widgets. So yeah, these are just some of the resources that you could definitely look into. The other is that finally, after you're done installing Flutter, you need to have a core understanding of widgets. Basically, widgets are the UI components of Flutter. So every UI-related thing that you see in a Flutter app, it's a widget. Be it a text, be it an icon, be it a button, be it an image, be it a drawer, a side drawer, navigation drawer, be it a bottom navigation tab. Everything and anything in Flutter related to UI is called a widget. And in order to understand what widgets are, which widget corresponds to what properties are there in every widget, in each widget, you can experiment with all of that on this flutterstudio.app link. It enables you to do that. Now, you have experimented with the widgets. Now you actually want to start programming in Flutter. You can definitely head over to Code Labs. Okay, they're present on Flutter. There's actually a lot of links present on the official Flutter documentation for tutorials, for Code Labs, for everything. So they offer very easy step-by-step guides as to if you want to, let's say, create an application that looks like WhatsApp in terms of UI. Then step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do this. It just offers you a tutorial as if you were watching a video on YouTube. So really handy. They're topic-wise, level-wise available on the official Flutter documentation, so definitely check that out. And finally, what is an ideal roadmap that you can follow when you're just getting started with Flutter? So first of all, you need to understand widgets. Okay, once you've developed a basic understanding of widgets, like which widgets are there and for what purposes, you can put them all together to build static layouts. Okay, just go over to Behance or Pinterest or whatever, pick up a layout that you really like and code it statically. Okay, so like no data changing, it's just that static layout. Then you learn user interaction, how to take input from users. If user presses on this, what happens? You take all of that into consideration, and then you integrate that into your application. Then you develop a basic understanding of navigation and routing. So if you're on screen A and the user presses on this button, you want to progress to this other screen, how would you do that? All of that stuff. Then you understand about state management. State management is basically Flutter's way of changing data and changing state. Actually, the status of the UI basically changes when the data bound with it changes. Okay, so there are many different state management techniques. Just start with the basic one, which is set state, and just experiment with it, see what happens, how it happens, and just using state management and user interaction, you just go ahead and build dynamic layouts with widgets. So initially you start off with building static layouts. Now you build dynamic layouts. So for instance, if a user presses a button and there's this container or there's this image, okay, this colored container, let's say, on the screen, then it changes color. Okay, so just experiment with that. Basic state management, basic dynamic layouts. Okay. Then you learn basic networking and API calls, okay, how you use async calls and how you use promises, futures, and all of that stuff in order to fetch the data from the internet. You learn the syntax of it and then code a very simple application. So for instance, you're using an open source API for fetching the weather, okay? You just follow its guidelines, how that happens, and just integrate that into your application, okay? So do it chunk by chunk by chunk. Don't worry about doing everything all at once. All of this typically would take you about 1 month to get familiar with Flutter, or half a month if you're committing more time to Flutter. But usually 1 month is sufficient. Or for those who are absolute beginners in Flutter, like who don't even have programming experience, then for those, I would say around 2 to 3 months should be sufficient. Anyway, once you've implemented that, you obviously need to learn a database. There are many databases that you can learn. The simplest one is Firebase, which is a non-SQL database by Google again. So you learn authentication in Firebase, Firestore for querying and storing data, Firebase storage for storing and querying media, and all that stuff. Integrate small specific elements of Firebase into your application. And voila, you have your entire Flutter application ready. Now, at this point, after you've learned database and database integration, you can pick off any application UI or whatever from Behance or Pinterest or whatever, and you can clone them as per your understanding of Flutter. You can clone their UI UX from on your own. You can clone entire apps, like people have cloned Slack, people have cloned Instagram, and so on and so forth. So it's entirely up to you. And by the time that you've done with experimenting a lot with Flutter, and you're feeling confident now that you can create your own application, then by all means do that. If you have a very simple idea, be it a daily reminder app, be it an Azan app, be it a to-do reminder app, anything, absolutely anything, just do it. Okay, just do it. Yeah, Sheila Boost app. So again, if you have any questions, drop it in the comment section. We do have a lot of time left. So I will be quickly demonstrating to you what Flutter really looks like in action. So let me just stop sharing this so that I can share my full screen so that you guys can see the project creation and everything. Just give me a second.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sakina. Should we start the QA, because I have seen questions here?
Okay. Right. Let me just create this project, and then while the project is loading up and building, I can answer all of those questions.
Okay, sure, why not?
Yeah, so could you tell me some of the questions? I can't really open StreamYard at the moment, otherwise the screen would go in infinity mode.
Okay, sure, why not? Okay, let me give you. Yeah. Okay, the question is, I highlighted it.
I actually can't open up StreamYard right now because since I'm sharing my entire screen, it would go into infinity mode and I'm only using
Sorry,
one
I
screen.
didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah. My screen is visible, right?
No, not really.
That here is my screen visible.
Yes, it is.
Hello.
Yes, it is visible.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay. Oops. Okay. So let me just quickly walk you through this application. Going to be demonstrating a very simple use case. It's not necessary that you can understand the code here and now. What's important is that you understand how quick and easy it is to develop the simplest of things or the most complicated of things with Flutter. So the aim of this demonstration is not to make you understand the code itself. It's just to give you a preview of how things are working. While the project is loading, Tathir, would you like to dictate the question to me so that I can answer it?
Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, can you see the question?
Themes. Yeah, of course. Wait. App using by theme website? Oh, you mean like using specific themes for creating websites, as in the themes that are mentioned in the cookbook? Yeah, you can definitely do that. It offers you to use different themes for different purposes. So naturally, anything that you can do on a mobile application, you can replicate that on the website itself. So yeah, you can definitely utilize themes in order to create websites. But if by themes you mean those themes that are like WordPress themes or really custom themes, then I don't know about that because I'm not a web developer, but if you're talking about basic themes, such as the day theme or the night theme or the other themes that are supported in a mobile application, then you can definitely replicate that in a website itself. Okay, so I will be taking the rest of the questions just in a moment. I just want to demonstrate to you how this thing is working. As you can see, whenever you create a basic project, in fact, any project in Flutter, it generates this boilerplate code, this boilerplate application for you that you can experiment with. So it already generates this for you by default. What this does is that you press this plus button and it keeps incrementing this counter over here, and you can see it being incremented over here. Now, the good thing about Flutter is that hot reload, as I told you guys about it earlier. So from here, let's change this from blue to indigo, and let's see what happens. I have pressed Control S for hot reload, and as you can see, instant changes reflected over here. Now, the other thing that I was talking about is Flutter Inspector. So this is the thing that you would see while your app is being run on a device, be it emulator or physical device, not if your application is completely off. So you would see this over here. You click on it, Flutter Inspector, and there's this toggle button over here, which says Enable Select Widget Mode, okay? You click on that, and once you've clicked on that, you can basically tap on anything, and it will take you to the relevant portion where it's located in your widget tree. So it generates this widget tree over here, so you can check out your hierarchy. This is very useful when you've created very complicated layouts and you need to see what is located where, okay? So widget trees come in really handy at the time. at that time. And then also it took you over here, okay, as you saw that this text widget was highlighted. This was because I have selected on this specific widget and I wanted to see which part of code is associated to this. So as you can see, this is the counter text widget, which is taking the counter variable and it's displaying it. Now, very quickly, let me demonstrate something to you. Just give me a moment. As you can see, I'm just declaring some variables over here. Why I'm doing that, I'll be demonstrating it to you just fairly quickly. All right, so instead of these two things, let's change this to something very interesting. So all right, sorry. Okay, as you can see, I have created an animated container with some of the properties. And let me just add a function for that. Which one is it? Oh, right, of course. Oh, yes. Okay. Let's give it an animation property. Okay, we have given it some properties, and now let's modify this function over here. Let's generate some random colors as well. Okay, I think this should do the trick. So what I've done now, in fact, no, I should be doing a hot restart. Why I need to be doing hot restart? Because I've declared these new variables, and what hot reload does is that it just runs this build method again, okay? It doesn't take these new variables into consideration. That's why I've done hot restart. Now, what this is supposed to do is that, as you can see over here, is an animated container. What it's going to do is that it has some properties with height, the color, the radius, the curve, like what kind of animation should follow, and how, for what duration should this animation last for. And then I have specified all of these things in the set state of this button, so that when the user presses this button, the random values are generated for the width, for the height, a random color is generated. So, and all of this is being done inside set state. So what set state would do is that it would trigger the build function again, and it would update the UI where all of these properties are being used, which is this animated container itself. So let's see that in practice. As you can see, with every press of the button, the container is automatically changing. It's automatically animating, and it's really interesting, and I could honestly play with it entire day. Now, if I were to compare this with native Android, it would have taken a lot of time to do this very simple thing. The good thing about Flutter is that, as I told you, it comes pre-packaged with a lot of widgets, especially animation. It has a lot of support for animation. So you don't have to write huge chunks of code to make the simplest things happen. There are widgets that take care of that, and you can easily practice that with this. Okay, and now I'll just stop playing with this so that I can answer all of your questions. Otherwise, I would be playing with this the entire day. All right, so now I will be taking all of your questions. All right, now I'll be taking your questions. So since we have around 10 minutes left, I will be able to take some of them. But if your question goes unanswered, please by all means contact me on LinkedIn.
Okay, so there's a question here. Let me show you. Yes.
Do we have to program the widgets or the functions performed by them, or are the widgets pre-programmed? Yes, good question. A lot of widgets are pre-programmed, okay? So you don't have to worry about programming the widgets themselves. Rather, you will be reusing the code that's already there. So for instance, when we looked at the animated container over here, obviously it's doing a lot of animation behind the scenes. And for raw animation, there is actually a lot of code that you need to write. So if you were to actually go inside the animated container itself and look at its raw code, it's there. You can absolutely look at the code, but you don't have to code those widgets yourself. You just have to basically use them. And at other times, if you want to make very complex UIs, then you bring together those different widgets in order to create your own widget, okay? So basically in Flutter, everything is a widget. The screen is a widget, buttons are widget, stateful widgets and stateless widgets, they themselves are different kinds of widgets. So everything is a widget, okay? It just comes pre-packed with those different widgets that you don't have to code yourself. You just have to call them, you just have to use them. Okay, I see another question from Zohaib that you have some question regarding themes. I think it would be better that you contact me on LinkedIn so that I can see what kind of errors you are facing and what you're basically trying to do. So just contact me on LinkedIn and I'll look into it and I'll see how you can resolve that. Which database?
I can share LinkedIn. I will share your LinkedIn account through the comment section.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Now we have a question by Maheen. Tatir, could you please highlight that? Right. Which databases are supported by Flutter? Many databases. Okay, we have Firebase. We have the GraphQL database, which is a graph database. We have obviously the SQL database, but that's the SQF Lite, I think. I don't exactly remember. So basically, offer support for different databases, be it SQL or non-SQL. We have Firebase, we have AWS. It basically has support for almost all of the databases, even relational databases, graph databases, SQL databases, non-SQL databases. So it offers support for a lot of databases. Okay, we have a question. Can we create GUI by simply drag and drop buttons and text boxes, etc.? Okay. All right. So in Flutter, in native Android and in native iOS, you can create your UI with the drag drop approach. Okay. Flutter does not offer that. Flutter is a pure programmatic approach. It's a blank canvas, so you can start from whichever scratch and you can basically do anything. It's a blank canvas. Okay. So that's one thing I had trouble adapting to because I was coming from native Android. It doesn't offer you drag and drop approach, but it offers you the code thing. But also, since it supports hot reload and hot restart, you don't exactly notice the difference. It's like whenever you make any changes to the UI, you can see all of those changes reflected there and then on your application when you press hot reload or hot restart. So you don't exactly notice the difference. Once you get into programming Flutter and just coding your layouts in Flutter, then you eventually get a hang of it. It's not that difficult, trust me, and the shortcuts, they really make it pretty simple and easy as well. And you can obviously make any kind of layout using any kind of widgets. Okay. When Flutter is so easy, why people choose it? Okay, so people have their own reasons. Okay, one reason is that since React Native has been in the market for some time, so obviously there are relatively more job opportunities for React Native. So people often do that. Okay, that could be one reason. The other reason is that some companies, they're already working on React Native. Okay, so they just need additional developers for the maintenance and support for those applications. So that's another reason that people learn React Native. Another reason is that if someone has already done web development, so he's familiar with the web stack, web technologies, then he would learn React Native because, like I said, React Native works on web technology. So it's easier for web developers to understand rather than other developers who are coming from other backgrounds or other people who are just completely new to application programming, right? So everyone has their own reasons. It's just that obviously, there has been a lot of hype about React Native. So even when someone tries to consider Flutter, there will always be that group of people who comes in and says, why are you learning Flutter? Go for React Native. There are so many jobs available. But little do they know that even though it has been only 3.5 years since Flutter came out, it has gained a lot of momentum, a lot of attraction. And let me tell you, from a CEO standpoint, many of the clients that reach out to us for application development, for those who have done their homework regarding technology stacks, they specifically request that we develop in Flutter. Okay, React Native, as people have observed, it has somewhat performance issues due to the technology stack that it's using. Flutter is definitely easy and quick to learn, and I would definitely recommend everyone to learn it. But for those, I mean, there will always be one group of people who will still prefer React Native over Flutter. So it's debatable. It's up to you. It actually boils down to you just explore things yourself, experiment with things yourself, and you'll see what's easier and what you should definitely learn. Okay, so it's just kind of like personal, debatable something. Right. Okay. So for programming in Flutter, you just need to know one programming language, which is the beauty of it, and that is Dart. If you are already familiar with other programming languages such as Java or maybe C#, then learning Dart, you wouldn't even have to learn Dart specifically because it's pretty much similar to, I would say, Java, except that there are many things in Dart that you can do in just one line of code. Java is typically, it's very wordy. You have to write a lot of code to perform a simple task. In Dart, you can do everything, most of the things in 1 or 2 lines of code. So yeah, it just uses one programming language as opposed to other frameworks. For instance, in Android, you have Java, you have Kotlin, and then for the design, you have XML, and you have so many other different languages. Okay, the beauty of Flutter is that you just have to learn one language, which is Dart. Do Flutter, okay, are these databases supported on web also, or just mobile app? I think most of them are supported on web. Like, from the things that are supported in mobile applications, 85 to 95% of the things are also supported in web. So if there's something if there's a database that you're using for a mobile application, it's very likely that that is also supported in web as well. And you don't have to make that much changes in code. It's pretty simple. Do Flutter works with any machine language? If so, what are the best frameworks to use? I'm not so sure about that. I'll have to look into it and get back to you on that. Yeah. Because basically the way Flutter works is that whatever Flutter code you write, it is by default, when you're building the application, it is by default compiled into the native code for the platform that you're building the application for. So that's one translation that's already happening. Other than that, I don't remember what other machine language it supports. I'll have to look into it and I'll get back to you. Okay, so I think it's 12 p.m.
All right, Sakina, we are very thankful to you for your time in the session, and I hope everybody who was listening to this session has learned something great. And so thank you very much for your time. And I would like to announce that soon there will be a Flutter workshop as well for you guys, because this was just an introductory session, and soon in the future we will have other workshops as well to cover some advanced topics in Flutter, and you guys should listen to them as well. And so that is all about this session today.
All right, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm most active on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll definitely respond. Thank you for tuning in on a Saturday morning. It was really fun having you all.
Okay, thank you so much, Sakina. We will see you soon, inshallah, on the next sessions of the Flutter workshop.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, sure, Reinhard. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for listening these. I hope that you get some info from the Flutter, and soon we will have a Flutter workshop. Maybe we will attend as a physical workshop soon at Lahore. So just wait for the announcement. Thank you so much. Now it's time for the end. Thank you so much, Moise, for helping out, and see you guys in the next section. Allah Hafiz.